My name is Isabella. I'm 29 years old. The county courthouse sat at the end of Main Street like it had been there forever, waiting for families to come inside and call damage by nicer names. The stone steps were still dark from an early drizzle. The flag above the roof snapped hard in the wind. My coffee had gone cold. By the time I reached the doors, the paper cup in my hand smelled like burnt Starbucks, wet cardboard, and something bitter that matched the taste already sitting in my mouth. The air outside carried wet concrete, old cigarette smoke from coats passing too close, and that sharp, cold edge that tells you winter is done asking permission. I stood there for 1 second longer than I should have. Then I went in. Inside, everything felt too bright, too polished, too cold. White fluorescent panels buzzed overhead. The tile floors threw back reflections of moving shoes, courthouse posters, security signs, and the legs of hard wooden benches worn smooth by other people's custody fights, estate disputes, divorces, and quiet disasters. A bailiff near the metal detector kept repeating the same tired instructions in the same flat voice, and legal folders opened and shut all around me with that soft, dry rustle paper makes when nobody wants to admit what it contains. Then I stepped into courtroom B. My mother was already there. Front row, navy wool coat, leather folder in her lap, ankles crossed, shoulders relaxed, and smiling. Not warmly, not nervously, just that small, controlled smile she used whenever she believed she had already arranged the ending. My father sat beside her in the tan jacket he wore to funerals, hospital waiting rooms, and church on cold Sundays. He looked up when I came in, saw me, and turned his face the other way, just like that. That hurt more than her smile did. Her smile was expected. His silence was familiar. But that little turn of the head, that was its own kind of confession. There are betrayals that explode, doors slamming, voices rising, a glass breaking in the sink, and then there are the quieter ones, the ones that sit down neatly in a courtroom and wait for the clerk to call the case. I had barely gotten into my seat when she did. County Clerk, case number 2024-17823, petition for emergency conservatorship and temporary financial restraint. That was the language they used. Protective language, respectable language. Language that sounded careful and concerned if you did not know how people like my mother worked. On paper, she was asking the court to protect my grandmother's remaining estate assets from mishandling. In real life, she was trying to freeze me out, stain me early, and make me look unstable before I could get close enough to the truth to prove what she had done. My attorney, Mr. Cormac Lee, touched the edge of the table and motioned for me to sit fully. He was younger than I expected for probate work. Dark suit, straight back, calm face. He never tried to make me feel better with the usual false soft lawyer voice. He dealt in clarity, not comfort, and by that point I trusted clarity more. I had hired him 3 nights earlier with money borrowed against my car title and what I had left after rent, student loans, gas, and the missed shifts at the dental office where I worked the front desk processing insurance claims and apologizing to strangers for things their providers had denied. As I sat down, my mother leaned slightly toward me. "You still had time to hire someone." She said it softly. Not to help. Not even to mock, really. Just to let me know she had expected me to come in alone. I looked at her. "You seem disappointed." She smoothed the edge of her folder with one finger. "I'm relieved," she said. "It will look more proper this way." Proper. That word again. My mother loved that word. Proper dress, proper tone, proper family photo posture, proper silence at the dinner table, proper church behavior, proper grief, proper daughters. From the outside, my family looked respectable in the specific way a lot of small-town American families do. We had the church directory photo. We had the framed military portrait of my father's father in the hallway. We had Thanksgiving tables full of casseroles and tight smiles. We had a mother who remembered birthdays on Facebook and sent tasteful sympathy bouquets before the obituary ink was dry. We had a father who helped neighbors shovel snow and never once raised his voice where other people could hear it. And inside that picture, I had always been the daughter expected to absorb the fracture. When I was 8, my cousin broke a lamp during Christmas dinner, and somehow I was the child made to apologize because I had been too loud and probably started it. When I was 13, my younger brother backed Dad's old Ford into the mailbox too fast, and my mother told people at church I had distracted him with one of my moods. When I was 19 and moved into my first apartment, a place with chipped counters, a leaking faucet, Walmart curtains, and an upstairs neighbor who played country music after midnight, my mother walked through once, looked around, and said, "You always settle for chaos because you don't know how to create peace." Some daughters are raised to be loved. Some are raised to carry explanation. The judge entered, and the whole room rose. Judge Bannister, broad shoulders, silver hair, reading glasses low on his nose. The kind of face that did not look easily impressed, easily charmed, or easily rushed. My grandmother used to say men like that were dangerous in the best way because they listened longer than other people expected. I hoped she had been right. My mother's lawyer stood first. Martin Hale, local, smooth, connected. The kind of man who knew the clerks by name and could sound almost compassionate while laying a trap. He did not come at me with anything openly ugly. That would have been too obvious. He painted me in soft colors. Emotional, erratic, financially irresponsible, recently agitated, possibly influencing estate records while under distress after my grandmother's death. He mentioned that I had argued with my mother at the hospital, mentioned that I had shown up at the house unannounced, mentioned that I had demanded access to financial records. He did not mention why. Because context is where liars start to starve. He handed up texts, selected ones. A photo of me in my mother's kitchen, face flushed, hand lifted mid-sentence. A voicemail transcript where I said, "You are not going to keep lying and get away with it." A note from a family friend saying I had seemed obsessive about paperwork after the funeral. Everything arranged carefully, nothing false enough to collapse on sight. Nothing honest enough to mean what he wanted it to mean. Then he said the line that made my stomach turn. "Mrs. Dalton and Mr. Dalton are deeply concerned for their daughter. They are not here as adversaries. They are here out of love and necessity." Love. Necessity. My father kept his face angled away. Not fully, just enough. Enough to say he heard it. Enough to say he was letting it stand. And I stared at the side of his jaw and remembered being 10 years old in a DMV line while my mother had embarrassed me for crying over a lost library book. He had squeezed my hand and leaned down and whispered, "I'll protect you when it matters." Funny how some promises don't shatter. They just quietly expire. Then Cormac stood. No theater, no big performance, no false outrage. He just started pulling threads. He asked why an emergency petition had been filed 6 weeks after my grandmother's death, not sooner. He asked why mediation had not been attempted first. He asked why the estate ledger attached to the petition listed a transfer I had never seen disclosed in the preliminary probate filing. He asked why my mother had failed to mention that my grandmother had given me durable medical power of attorney during the last year of her life. That changed the room. Judge Bannister looked over his glasses. "Counselor," he said to Hale, "why was that omitted?" Hale glanced at my mother. "It was not believed relevant to the present petition." The judge kept looking at him. "It sounds relevant to me." For the first time that morning, my mother's smile moved. Not much, just enough. Enough for me to know she had not expected resistance. The hearing recessed for lunch before any ruling came down. Out in the hallway, the vending machines hummed beside a bulletin board, pinned with notices for notary services, child support resources, concealed permit applications, and county office hours. People drifted past carrying legal envelopes and styrofoam cups. The air from the vents came down cold and dry. Somewhere near the stairwell, heels kept clicking across tile with the same impatient rhythm over and over until it started to sound like a second pulse. I leaned against the wall and stared at the floor, trying to get my hands to stop shaking. Cormac came back from the clerk's desk holding a request slip. "Did your grandmother ever mention a second account?" he asked. "No." "Any transfer over 50,000? "No." He watched my face for a moment. "Then your mother is moving this fast because she thinks you're close." I let out one laugh that did not feel like laughter. "Close to what?" He folded the slip in half. "Whatever required this much effort to make you look unreliable." That sentence stayed with me. Because it was clean. Because it fit. Because even before I had proof, I knew it was true. I had not walked into that courthouse knowing the whole shape of what they had done. I only knew pieces. I knew my grandmother, Eleanor Price, had died in August after a slow decline that left her thinner, quieter, and angrier at needing help than she ever admitted out loud. I knew I had been the one taking her to appointments, sorting prescriptions, refilling pill organizers, balancing stacks of Medicare letters, pharmacy printouts, and Social Security notices on her dining room table while coffee cooled beside us. I knew my mother came around just often enough to be seen by neighbors, just often enough to remain the good daughter in public memory. I knew my grandmother had started hiding papers in strange places. Property tax receipts tucked inside cookbooks, a bank statement folded beneath a lamp base, a handwritten note about a deed transfer slipped into her Bible near the Book of Ruth. I knew one afternoon, about a month before she died, she gripped my wrist hard enough to make me look up and said, "When I go, do not let Helen handle everything." Helen was my mother. At the time, I thought it was old bitterness, normal resentment. One more round in the private war they had been fighting for years. I did not understand then that my grandmother was trying to warn me with whatever strength she had left. The first week after the funeral, my mother moved like a woman stepping onto a stage she had rehearsed for years. She coordinated flowers, organized meals, told extended family who could take what from the house. Set up a sign-in sheet near the dining room table so people would remember which casserole dish belonged to whom. She cried at all the correct moments, touched the right hands, spoke in that low, composed voice she used when she wanted grief to look tasteful, and she kept me busy. "Can you sort Nana's medications? Can you take the folding chairs back to the church? Can you run to Walmart for paper goods?" Always one more errand. Always one more task. Always something that kept me out of the room where the files were. At first, I missed it. Grief makes manipulation look like logistics. 3 days after the funeral, I came back from returning borrowed serving trays and found my mother and father in my grandmother's den with the door almost closed. My mother had the old metal file box open on the floor. That my father stood by the window like a man waiting for weather to pass. "What are you doing?" My mother looked up with a face so calm it almost made me doubt what I had seen. "Organizing. Without me? You don't need to be involved in every detail." I had power of attorney. And she's dead now. That was the first moment something cold moved through me. Not grief. Recognition. My father said nothing. He had turned silence into a life skill, not because he lacked thoughts, because silence protected his comfort. That night, I sat in my apartment with my bills spread across the kitchen counter, trying to figure out whether I could afford to miss another shift. My bedroom window faced the parking lot. Headlights dragged weak stripes across the blinds. Someone in the building across from mine still had Christmas lights hanging on their balcony even though it was September, and the blue bulbs blinked on and off like a broken signal. I went through my grandmother's texts. Most were ordinary. "Soup in the freezer. Doctor at 2. Can you bring stamps?" Then I found one from 3 months earlier. "If your mother asks, I haven't changed anything yet." I stared at it until the screen dimmed. Changed what? I kept scrolling. Keep the copy safe. No context. No attachment. No follow-up. I called her old landline voicemail even though I knew it had been disconnected after the funeral. I did it anyway. Some habits survive hope. The deadline answered with nothing, and the absence of her voice hit me in a place words do not reach. The next morning I drove to her house before work. My mother's SUV was already in the driveway, so was my father's truck. I sat there with my hands on the steering wheel, looking at the porch swing where Nana used to sit in a cardigan with her legs tucked under a blanket, watching neighborhood kids ride past the hedge. The mums on the front step had started to brown around the edges. A campaign flyer stuck out from under the doormat. The brass house numbers needed polishing. Nothing looked dramatic. That is how family theft often begins, under ordinary weather. I went in through the side door, voices carried from the den. If she pushes this, we file first. That was my mother, then my father. You said the originals were gone. The originals are not the problem. Helen, do not start. His voice dropped, hers sharpened. And I stood in the laundry room beside a basket of clean hand towels that still smelled like my grandmother's detergent. Then my shoe squeaked against the linoleum. The talking stopped. My mother appeared in the doorway. Not startled, annoyed. You should knock. It's Nana's house. For the moment, for the moment, that phrase tore something open. Not because of the legal meaning, because of the emotional one. She was already speaking as if possession settled morality, as if getting there first made it hers. I asked what she meant. She said I was spiraling. I asked what originals Dad had been talking about. She said he meant insurance forms. I asked why the door was nearly shut. She said because unlike me, some people knew how to handle paperwork without turning everything into a spectacle. We fought in the kitchen beside the ceramic cookie jar Nana always kept full of peppermints nobody liked. My father stood by the sink like furniture with a pulse. Then my mother said it. You always confuse being needed with being entitled. I left, shaking. Not because my feelings were hurt, because I saw the shape of it. She had already chosen my role, and every objection I made was going to be folded into that role and used later as evidence. I started asking questions. At first, simple ones. At the funeral home, I asked who signed the final invoice. My mother. At the bank, I asked whether my grandmother's accounts were frozen pending probate. The manager could not tell me much, but his expression changed when I repeated my mother's name. At the county clerk's office, I requested the preliminary estate filing. The clerk printed what was available and slid the stack across with that practiced local neutrality people wear when they suspect a family is eating itself alive but know better than to comment. On the second page, I saw a transfer to an account I did not recognize. $48,600, dated 11 days before my grandmother died. I drove straight to my mother's house. My parents still lived in the same brick ranch where I grew up. Same black shutters, same front room nobody used except at Christmas. Same air inside, where every object looked settled and every emotion felt managed. My mother had put small pumpkins by the steps because fall was coming and appearances did not pause for mourning. She opened the door before I had knocked twice. "But you need to stop showing up like this. Where did the money go?" She barely blinked. "What money?" I held up the printout. "You obtained court records to harass your own family?" "It's public filing. Your grandmother had expenses." $48,000 in expenses? She made decisions you weren't part of. Then say what they were. She stepped back just enough to keep the screen door between us. "You are becoming unwell." There it was, the first clean move, not an answer. A label. My father appeared in the hallway behind her. I looked at him. "Dad, where did it go?" He shifted his jaw once. "This isn't the place." "Then tell me the place." He looked at the floor. "You need to calm down." I laughed. Not loudly, not wildly, and just in that stripped down way you do when someone says something so familiar and so useless, you can feel the whole pattern at once. That night, my cousin Jenna called. We had grown up in fragments, shared birthday parties when we were little, shared side eyes at Thanksgiving when adults repeated the same stories, then drifted into that careful family distance people call maturity when they really mean self protection. Her voice was small. Aunt Helen told people you scared her. Did she? She said you've been unstable since Nana got sick. Interesting timing. Pause. Then, she also told Aunt Marie you were asking about the deed. I sat straight up in bed. What deed? Jenna went quiet. Then she said, I thought you knew. That was how the next part started, not with a revelation. With someone assuming the person bleeding had already seen the wound. According to Jenna, my grandmother had talked in the spring about changing the deed on the house and surrounding acreage. Not a huge property, just under 7 acres. But in our county, land meant history, pride, leverage, the right kind of family story. I had heard Nana say she was making arrangements. I thought she meant the will. Jenna thought I knew she had been trying to protect the property from my mother. Neither of us understood yet how dangerous that gap had become. The next afternoon, I called my grandmother's longtime neighbor, Mrs. Donnelly, 74, sharp eyes, permanent opinion. She and Nana had spent 30 years in a backyard Cold War over rose bushes and loved each other in the irritated, loyal way only old neighbors sometimes do. When I asked whether she remembered anyone coming by with papers last spring, she answered immediately. Oh yes, mobile notary, red scarf, parked crooked. Your grandmother complained about that for 2 days. My skin prickled. A notary meant signatures mattered. A notary meant paper existed. A notary meant this had structure. Cormac helped track her down. Denise Avery. She remembered my grandmother because Eleanor Price had insisted on offering her pound cake before signing and had spent 10 full minutes complaining about her daughter's habit of fixing things that are not hers. Denise could not hand over documents on her own, but she confirmed enough to shift the floor. My grandmother had signed an affidavit and a deed packet, witnessed, stamped, prepared for recording. Was it recorded? I asked. Denise frowned. It should have been. Should have been. Another clean phrase. Another little cut. Cormac filed a records request immediately. Nothing. No deed packet. No matching recording. No affidavit in the probate file either. That was when I understood my mother had not just hidden paper. She had hidden absence. A missing filing is its own kind of confession. After that, I stopped sleeping properly. I would wake at 3 in the morning with courthouse words looping in my head. Petition, standing, credibility, temporary restraint, discovery, sanctions. By day, I sat at the front desk at work with a smile pinned to my face and checked patients in and scanned insurance cards and apologized to angry people for coverage decisions I had not made. On lunch break, I ate crackers in my car and read probate statutes on my phone like someone trying to teach herself the grammar of survival. My mother escalated. She texted my landlord, whose wife knew her from church, asking whether I had been having difficulties. She called my supervisor, out of concern. She told relatives I was obsessed with money. Told one aunt I had wanted Nana's house all along. Told another I had pressured Nana near the end. She moved fast because in towns like ours, reputation gets dressed long before facts get out of bed. Then came the petition. Emergency conservatorship over estate matters. Temporary financial restraint. Protective wording. Poisoned purpose. When I read it, I understood 2 things all at once. She needed me discredited before discovery widened, and my father had helped her. Because attached to the filing was a typed family chronology of my supposed volatility going back years. Some things were false, some were technically true, but stripped of context. Some were so personal, they made my throat close just reading them. A panic attack after college finals. The fight after my ex-boyfriend emptied our joint account. The month I picked up extra shifts and forgot to renew my car registration on time. My mother could not have built that file alone. Only my father knew enough of the soft tissue. Only he knew where the old bruises lived. There are people who hurt you with anger. Then there are the people who hand someone else the map. The first hearing was supposed to box me in. That became clearer over the next 10 days. But my mother miscalculated one thing. She thought fear would make me sentimental. Instead, it made me precise. Cormac started issuing subpoenas for banking records tied to the estate account and any transfers made under my grandmother's authority during her last 60 days. He petitioned for draft wills, codicils, affidavits, unrecorded property papers, anything referenced by either side. Then he did something quietly brilliant. He requested metadata. People think if paper disappears, the truth disappears with it. But digital habits leave fingerprints. My grandmother had a small laptop she mostly used for bridge club emails, recipes, and once, famously, to print coupons she never actually redeemed. But during her last months, I had shown her how to scan documents because she kept saying she was afraid of losing things to drawers. After the funeral, my mother took the laptop. But cloud backups do not care who feels entitled. I still had Nana's email recovery information because I had been managing her medical portal and pharmacy account near the end. With court authorization through Discovery, Cormac got access. Inside her cloud storage, under a folder labeled Garden Notes, we found it. Not the deed packet. Something better. A scanned affidavit in my grandmother's own hand. Dated May 14th. I, Eleanor Louise Price, affirm that any attempt by my daughter Helen Dalton to alter, intercept, conceal, or redirect my property documents is against my wishes. I am of sound mind. I do not trust her to manage my estate without oversight. Copies of executed deed instruments and account instructions have been provided separately. Signed, witnessed, notarized. And I read it sitting in Cormac's office and felt the air leave me slowly, like my body had been bracing for a hit so long it had forgotten how release worked. She knew, I said. Yes. She knew my mother would do something. Cormac looked at the page once more and then back at me. It appears she planned for that possibility. There are moments when grief changes shape. That was one of them. Up until then, some part of me was still moving like a daughter asking to be seen fairly. That affidavit ended that. My grandmother had not died confused about my mother. She had died trying to outmaneuver her. And that changed me. The next break came from the last person I expected. My father's brother, Uncle Ray. He and my mother had never gotten along because Ray had a talent for saying true things at the worst possible time, and my mother preferred people who mistook polish for innocence. He lived 2 counties over, fixed HVAC units, smelled permanently of wintergreen gum and machine oil, and skipped half our holidays because, as he liked to say, some tables charge extra for hypocrisy. He called on a Thursday night. "You still fighting them?" "Yes." "Good." No sympathy, no speech, just approval dropped like a wrench onto concrete. Then he told me my father had met him in a diner parking lot a month before Nana died. Sat in his truck for 40 minutes and asked whether Ray knew anything about challenging deed transfers after death. At the time, Ray thought he was just fishing for general information. Now he knew better. My father had not been confused. He had been worried. Ray remembered one line especially. "If Bella goes digging, it'll get ugly." Bella. That was what he called me. My whole life. Soft nickname, hard truth. He had known I would go digging because he knew there was dirt. Then the bank records came in. The $48,600 transfer had not gone to medical expenses, not funeral reserves, not home repairs. It had gone into an LLC tied to a property investment my mother held jointly with a man named Lewis Grant. Lewis Grant, local developer. Bought distressed homes, renovated them cheaply, sold them with staged kitchens and fresh mulch. He had also gone to church with my parents for years. I remembered him at potlucks, laughing too loud, always smelling faintly of cedar cologne and cigarettes, always complimenting my mother in ways that made my father seem to shrink a little beside her. Almost the LLC record showed my mother had bought in months earlier. Capital contribution, 45,000. 3 days later, another payment covered administrative legal services. My grandmother's money had helped fund my mother's side investment. That alone would have gutted her petition. But it was not the worst part. Buried in the subpoena return was a cashier's check from my grandmother's secondary account made out to the county recorder for filing fees and transfer taxes. A deed packet had been prepared, and someone had stopped it after execution. Cormac leaned back in his chair and looked at me for a long second. "She didn't just use the money," he said. "She intercepted the transfer." "Can we prove that?" "We can prove enough to make them explain it under oath." After that, he moved fast. He motioned to supplement the probate record, motioned to compel, challenge to standing, request for forensic accounting review. Because my mother had made the mistake of wrapping her lies in moral language, every new fact made her look worse. She called me the next Sunday at 6:12 in the morning. I almost let it ring out. Then I answered, "What?" "You need to stop this. That's a strange opening. You're embarrassing this family. You filed against me in probate court because you forced my hand." "By asking where Nana's money went?" Her breath sharpened. "You have always been vindictive when you don't get your way. And you have always confused control with love." Silence. Real silence. Breathing silence. Then she lowered her voice. "You are not built for what happens next. Try me." She hung up. See, threats sound different when panic starts getting under them. Over the next week, other family members shifted. Not nobly, not publicly, just enough. Aunt Marie sent screenshots of texts where my mother called me mentally unraveling before the petition had even been filed. Jenna forwarded a voicemail from my father asking whether I had said anything about missing papers. Mrs. Donnelly gave a statement that she had seen my mother carrying file folders out of Nana's house the night before the locks were changed. The locks. I have not even told you about that part. 4 days after the funeral, I came by with groceries because Nana always froze too much soup, and I was not ready for strangers or relatives or even family to clean out a freezer that still felt like part of her. I put my key in the side door. It would not turn. But at first I thought my hand was slipping. Then I saw the new brass cylinder. My mother had changed the locks on my grandmother's house before probate was settled. Later she called it a practical precaution. That is what polished people do. They rename violation until it sounds like management. The second hearing was set for November. By then the town had started dressing for Christmas. Wreaths on lampposts, fake snow in storefront windows, a Salvation Army bell outside the pharmacy. Cold enough that every breath outside the courthouse showed white for a second before vanishing. Inside, the radiators clanked and the air still felt cold anyway. This time I did not walk in shaking. I came in carrying copies. My mother wore cream. A terrible choice. It made her look even more like a woman auditioning for innocence. Then my father sat beside her again. He looked older now. Not sorry, just worn down in that selfish way men do when consequences finally require them to participate. Before the judge came in, my mother turned toward me. "There's still time to handle this privately. You had months. You don't understand what public damage does." "You do." That landed. I saw it. Just for a second, uncertainty touched her before she pulled her face back into place. The hearing opened on procedure. Then Cormac started laying paper down. The scanned affidavit from the cloud backup, the bank trail to the LLC, the notary statement, the cashier's check for the deed recording fees, the lock change invoice in my mother's name dated before estate authority had been resolved. each document landed quietly. That is the thing about paper. It does not need to shout. That is why liars are afraid of it. Hale objected on foundation, on authenticity, on scope. Judge Bannister allowed most of it in provisionally and kept writing notes. Then came the question that cracked the room. Mrs. Dalton, Cormac said, did you or did you not receive any executed property transfer packet from Eleanor Price in May of this year? No. Smooth voice, steady chin. Did you ever possess any original deed or affidavit signed by Eleanor Price regarding her property? No. Did you authorize or benefit from the transfer of $48,600 from an estate-linked account into Dalton Grant Property Holdings, LLC? Hale objected. Overruled. My mother lifted her chin a little higher. No, not in the way counsel is suggesting. That answer. That guilty little answer. The one that leaves room for a technicality later. Cormac handed up the LLC statement, the capital ledger, and the matching bank trail. My mother's mouth tightened. Then he did something I did not know he planned. He called my father. A murmur moved through the benches, not loud, just alive. My father looked at my mother first. That was the ugliest part. Not that he was afraid, that he checked her face before he walked to the stand. When he was sworn in, one hand stayed flat and the other curled against the rail like he needed both support and restraint. Cormac started easy. Name, address, relationship to the parties. And then, did you assist your wife in removing documents from Eleanor Price's residence after her death? I carried boxes. Did you know those boxes contained estate papers? Some of them. Did you see a signed affidavit naming your wife as untrustworthy in estate handling? His eyes flicked toward me, then away. I may have seen a paper. Did you tell your brother Raymond that if Isabella went digging, it would get ugly? I don't remember. Cormac handed him the transcript from Ray's sworn statement. Do you deny saying it? My father's face changed then. Not into courage, into calculation failing. No. Something inside me went very still. Not broken. Still. Because there it was. Not a mood. Not a suspicion. Not something that would later be rewritten as stress or confusion. A fact my father had known. Ye Cormac kept going. Were you aware before the original petition was filed that the filing would include character allegations against Isabella? Hale objected, partially sustained, rephrased. Did you know your daughter would be described in court filings as unstable? Yes. Did you help prepare any chronology or incident list describing Isabella that way? My father swallowed. I gave some context. Context, that pale, bloodless word, meant to cover betrayal in office language. Did you know any of those incidents were incomplete or misleading? He did not answer. Judge Bannister looked up. Mr. Dalton. Yes. It came out scraped. Then Cormac asked the question that has stayed with me more than any other. Why did you turn your face away from your daughter in the courtroom at the first hearing? Hale objected again, overruled. My father stared at the wood in front of him. Because I knew she would look at me. And? He breathed in. Not deeply, not bravely, just enough to say the next line. Because I knew if I looked back, I'd have to choose. That was it. That was my father. Not rage, not confusion. Choice delayed so long it became a whole personality. You could build a religion around cowardice and still never make it holy. The judge recessed again before ruling on sanctions or referral. Out in the hallway, my mother came toward me quickly enough that Cormac shifted half a step closer. She stopped just short. Her voice dropped low and flat. Sa, you have no idea what you've done. I do. You are tearing this family apart. No, I said. I stopped pretending it wasn't already torn. Something slipped in her face then. Not wildly. Just enough. Her eyes flattened. Your grandmother was senile and vindictive. She filled your head and used you because she hated me. She feared you. She owed me. There it was. Not grief, not sorrow, not misunderstanding, debt, ownership, claim. And suddenly I understood something that had existed long before the courtroom. My mother treated every sacrifice like a future invoice, every meal cooked, every ride given, every holiday hosted, every favor done. Everything entered into an invisible ledger. Love was never free with her. It accrued. And because I had stopped paying in obedience, she called me unstable. Here the judge's final order did not come down in one dramatic bolt. Real courts do not work like that. They move through findings, continuances, referrals, dry language, recorded consequence. But the arc bent. Judge Bannister denied the emergency conservatorship petition. He lifted the temporary financial restraint. He ordered a full forensic accounting review of the estate transfers. He referred the unexplained fund movement and possible document interception to the county prosecutor for review. He directed that all estate-related access be suspended pending neutral administration. And he noted, in language dry enough to slice skin, that the petition appeared intertwined with significant credibility concerns regarding the petitioning parties. My mother did not cry. Women like her do not waste tears where a stenographer can hear them. My father sat there looking like a man who had survived the flood, only to realize the ruined house still had to be entered. Afterward, extended family did what extended family always does. They formed private camps and public politeness. Some sent me proud little texts they would never repeat in front of my mother. Some said they hated conflict and hoped healing could begin now, which is what cowards often call the moment after somebody else has done the expensive thing. Some avoided me in the grocery store near the frozen foods aisle because choosing sides in daylight felt too binding. But the real collapse came 2 weeks later. The missing deed packet surfaced. Not from my mother, not from my father. From Lewis Grant. Apparently, once the prosecutor started asking questions about the LLC contribution, Lewis became practical very quickly. He turned over a scanned packet his office manager had kept after my mother asked whether backup copies should be destroyed. He saved himself by preserving her. Inside that packet was the executed quitclaim deed transferring the house and land into a life estate structure that protected my grandmother during her lifetime and passed the remainder interest to me on her death, with restrictions written specifically to prevent my mother from selling, leveraging, or redirecting the property without challenge. My grandmother had not just distrusted her, she had outplanned her. The deed had been real. The affidavit had been real. The missing filing had not been an accident. It had been intercepted. When Cormac called to tell me, I sat down on the floor of my apartment between the coffee table and the sofa because my knees stopped acting like mine. The room looked exactly the same as it had the day before. Target blanket on the couch, mail stacked by the lamp, cheap art print over the TV, laundry basket near the bedroom door, CVS receipt on the table beside ibuprofen, the hum of the refrigerator. Nothing cinematic, nothing beautiful. And yet everything had changed. I was not fighting for validation anymore. I was standing inside proof. The final confrontation happened where family endings usually do. Not in court, in a room somebody still insists on calling home. My mother asked to meet 3 days before Christmas. Of course she did. Holidays are where image-driven people like to renegotiate history. Mount garland softens memory. Candlelight suggests grace. Sugar cookies imply innocence. They think if the tree is lit in the corner, maybe the harm will look seasonal instead of structural. I went because I wanted to hear what she sounded like when control was no longer enough. The house smelled like cinnamon and furniture polish. White lights glowed in the front window. Nat King Cole played softly from a kitchen speaker. The same angel figurine my mother set out every December stood on the mantel beside red stitched stockings. Mine had been hung too. I almost laughed, even then, even after all of it. She still wanted props. My father opened the door. He looked smaller than I had ever seen him. "Thanks for coming. Did you ask me here, or did she?" He did not answer. That was answer enough. As my mother sat at the dining room table with folders in front of her, still, always folders. Paper had always been her weapon, her shield, her altar. "Sit down." "I'm fine." "You've made your point." "Have I?" "This has gone far enough." "For who?" She pressed her lips together. "Lewis overreacted. Your lawyer is inflaming this. The prosecutor is looking for leverage where there is none." "You stole from Nana." "I advanced funds tied to care and property planning." "Into your LLC." "It was temporary." "You buried the deed." "It was complicated." "You filed against me to keep me from finding it." Her voice sharpened. "Because you were becoming dangerous." "Dangerous. To liars, evidence always is." I turned to my father. "And you?" He rubbed his palms against his jeans under the table. I didn't think she'd go this far." "You helped her." "I was trying to keep things from blowing up." "You handed her pieces of me so she could build a case." He closed his eyes once. "I know." "No," I said. "You know now because it didn't work." He opened his eyes again, and for the first time in my life, I saw something that looked almost like shame without an excuse standing in front of it. Not enough to heal anything, enough to name. My mother stood. "You are enjoying this." "No." And I wasn't. That is the part people misunderstand about revenge when it is done right. The loud version looks satisfying from the outside. The real version costs too much to be fun. I was not glowing, not gloating, not standing there feeling triumphant. I was simply done paying admission to remain inside their fiction. I reached into my bag and laid 3 copies on the polished table. The prosecutor's inquiry letter, the deed packet, the affidavit in my grandmother's hand. 3 documents, flat under the dining room light. My mother stared at them like they might still move if she waited long enough. "You built your whole life around being believed," I said. She said nothing. "You taught everyone I was too emotional, too messy, too reactive. You taught Dad that silence counted as goodness. You taught me that if I just explained myself better, forgave faster, loved harder, maybe one day I could earn basic honesty from my own family." My voice stayed level. That mattered to me. Because for so much of my life, I had spoken from the defensive crouch she trained into me, explaining, softening, qualifying, pleading to be read fairly. And not anymore. "I'm not here to ask why you did it," I said. "I know why. Money, control, reputation. You thought if you discredited me first, nobody would care what you took." Her mouth opened. "You ungrateful little—" "No." I said it quietly. That quiet landed harder than shouting would have. "No. That version of me is over." The room held there. Christmas lights glowed in the front window. A car passed outside, tires hissing on damp pavement. The hallway clock ticked like it had my whole childhood. My father looked between us with the helplessness of a man who had mistaken passivity for innocence. For so long it had become his entire character. I picked up my coat. "Bella," I stopped. Not because the nickname still had hooks, because it didn't, and I wanted him to feel that. "I did love you," he said. I turned back. "Ah, then you should have protected me when it cost something." That broke him, not theatrically, no sobbing, no collapse, just a face finally giving way under a weight it had postponed too long. My mother stayed standing, rigid, pale, furious, still calculating, still searching for the version of the room where she could win. There wasn't one. I left before she could speak again. Outside, The air cut across my face so cold it felt clean. My breath lifted white under the porch light. Across the street, someone had inflatable reindeer in their yard, and one of them had tipped sideways into the wet grass. I remember that stupid detail because life keeps placing ordinary things beside endings, as if to remind you the world never pauses for your private collapse. The months after that were not magical. But I did not walk straight into peace. There were more filings, more interviews, more humiliating phone calls with auditors and county staff, more family gossip, more church whispers, more mornings waking up already tired. But one thing had changed all the way through. My mother's petition was dead. The probate court recognized the deed challenge and shifted administration under neutral oversight. The property transfer was upheld after supplemental review, supported by the recovered packet, the affidavit, the notary testimony, and Lewis's office manager. The LLC transaction triggered a settlement process that clawed back most of the diverted money. The prosecutor declined some of the broader charges, but pressed hard enough on document interference and misappropriation exposure that my mother's lawyer suddenly had to negotiate from a place he had never expected to occupy. My father signed a sworn corrective statement. Late, thin, but signed. It did not redeem him. Some signatures only confirm the ruins. I moved into my grandmother's house in March, not because it felt like victory, because it felt like truth. The porch needed sanding, the kitchen wallpaper peeled near the back door. The guest room still held 3 decades of folded tablecloths, button tins, half-used candles, and sweaters that smelled faintly of lavender and cedar even after months shut in drawers. Beyond the fence line, the field stayed brown through winter and then slowly turned green. In the mornings I drank coffee where my grandmother used to sit and listened to birds attack the feeder like tiny, furious creditors. Sometimes grief still hit there hard enough to bend me, but it was grief without gaslighting. That is a cleaner pain, a pain that does not require you to deny reality so other people can stay comfortable. My mother stopped calling after the settlement terms were finalized. Then she tried once more by letter. 3 pages, cream stationery, beautiful handwriting. Every sentence shaped to recast theft as misunderstanding, control as protection, and my resistance as cruelty. She wrote that families survive by choosing mercy. She wrote that I had always been strong, if sometimes misdirected. She wrote that one day I might understand the pressure she had been under. I burned it in the metal fire pit behind the house, not because I wanted drama, because some things are refuse. My father sent one birthday card, no return note inside, just one line. I think about the courtroom every day. I stood at the kitchen counter reading it while a thunderstorm rolled in over the back field, and for 1 second, I could feel the old version of me stir. The girl who would have treated regret like love. Who would have mistaken a crumb for a feast because she had been trained to be grateful for almost nothing? Then I set the card down. Some apologies arrived too late to become bridges. They are only weather reports from the other side. By summer, the story had settled around town the way all stories do. Distorted in places, sharpened in others, people knew enough. The nice version of my mother had cracks now no foundation makeup could cover. Her church friends grew formal. Invitations thinned. Lewis Grant vanished from holiday photos and potluck sign-up sheets. My father kept his head down more at the hardware store and waved less. None of that was the real victory. The real victory was quieter. I could walk into the county clerk's office and request copies under my own name without flinching. I could stand in line at the post office and not wonder who had heard what about me. I could hold tax notices, deed maps, probate filings, and family records without feeling like I was trespassing inside a narrative my mother owned. I got my name back, and with it, something even rarer. I stopped auditioning for love from people who only knew how to grant access in exchange for obedience. That is what I want you to hear if you have ever sat in a parking lot after some family betrayal, staring at your hands and wondering whether you are overreacting, whether maybe you are too sensitive, whether maybe all of this could still be fixed if you just explained yourself one better way. Listen to me. A lie said calmly is still a lie, and peace built on your silence is only another form of control. The last time I saw my mother in person was at a status conference the following fall. Nothing dramatic, no speech in the hallway, no trembling scene. She stood near the vending machines in a camel coat beside her attorney, carrying herself like dignity could be reconstructed through posture alone. I walked past within 6 feet of her. She looked at me, really looked. No smile, no smugness, and no private signal that she still understood the board better than I did, just a woman staring at someone she could no longer manage. My father stood a few feet behind her. He met my eyes. At last, it changed nothing. That was the final mercy I gave myself. I stopped treating delayed recognition as treasure. Judge Bannister signed the last order that afternoon, administrative mostly, dry language, corrected distributions, final account review, closure wrapped in paragraphs. When I walked out of the courthouse, the sky was clear for the first time I had ever seen it there. The granite steps were dry. Traffic moved steadily around the square. Somebody passed holding takeout in a brown paper bag that smelled like fries and black pepper. The flag above the building moved in a cleaner wind. I stood there for a moment with the papers in my hand. Not healed all at once. Not untouched, but clear. That matters more than people admit. Clarity is not loud. It does not always look brave from the outside. Sometimes it is just the steady decision to stop calling manipulation love, to stop calling silence protection, to stop translating another person's hunger for control into your own lifelong confusion. When I first walked into that courtroom, my mother smiled and my father turned his face the other way. They thought that image would define me, the unstable daughter, the embarrassing one, the girl who pushed too hard and lost. Instead, that morning became the place their version of reality started dying. My mother's smile is gone now. My father has nothing left to hide behind except the life he chose. And me? I walked out with the truth, my name, and a future neither of them gets to narrate ever again.